What if everything you were told about Christianity in Africa was incomplete? What if I told you Christianity was in Africa before it became powerful in Europe? What if Africa was never just a place where Christianity was brought, but one of the places that helped build it? For generations, many people have believed Christianity came to Africa through chains, colonizers, and conquest. And to be fair, in later centuries, European empires absolutely used Christianity as a weapon. They used it to justify slavery, erase identities, and dominate nations. But that is not where the story begins. Long before the slave ships, long before missionaries arrived with colonial flags, long before Europe painted Jesus in its own image, Africa was already part of the Christian story. From Egypt protecting baby Jesus, to African men standing beside Christ in his final moments, to mighty Christian kingdoms in Ethiopia and Nubia, to African scholars who shaped Christian theology itself. The truth is deeper, older, and more powerful than most people realize. So today we're uncovering the real history. How Christianity truly came to Africa, and how Africa helped shape Christianity itself. Most people imagine Africa entering Christianity centuries later. But that idea collapses the moment you open the Bible. One of the earliest moments in the life of Jesus Christ connects directly to Africa. When King Herod sought to kill the infant Jesus, Joseph was warned in a dream to flee immediately. Where did they run for safety? Egypt. Think about that. When danger surrounded the child who would change history, Africa became the place of refuge. Not Rome, not Greece, not Europe, Africa. Egypt sheltered Jesus, Mary, and Joseph during one of the most critical moments of the Christian story. That means Africa was not some distant land outside the faith, it was present at the very beginning. And that's not the only moment. Later, during the crucifixion, another African appears. His name was Simon of Cyrene. Cyrene was a city in North Africa, located in modern-day Libya. As Jesus struggled under the weight of the cross, Simon was compelled to help carry it. Imagine the symbolism. At the darkest moment of the Christian narrative, an African man is recorded helping Christ bear the burden. That detail is often skipped over, but it matters, because it shows something many never learned. Africans were not absent from Christianity's foundation. They were present in the story itself. And then came something even bigger. One of the earliest recorded converts outside Judea would also be African. But that story changes everything. By now, one myth has already been shattered. Africa was present at the beginning of Christianity. But chapter 2 takes it even further. Because one of the earliest recorded converts to Christianity was not Roman, not Greek, not European. He was African. The story appears in the book of Acts. A follower of Jesus named Philip was told to travel down a lonely desert road. No explanation. No crowd, no audience, just one road, and one encounter that would echo through history. Along that road, Philip saw an important traveler riding in a chariot. This man was no ordinary passerby. He was a high-ranking official from Ethiopia, a trusted servant of the queen, a man responsible for the royal treasury. He was educated, influential, and powerful. And yet, he was searching for something money and status could not give him. As he traveled, he was reading from the scroll of Isaiah, trying to understand its meaning. That moment matters, because it destroys another false narrative, that Africans only encountered Christianity through force or ignorance. Here was an African leader, intellectually engaged, spiritually curious, seeking truth for himself. Philip approached him and explained the message of Jesus Christ. The Ethiopian listened carefully. Then something incredible happened. As they passed water on the road, the official asked a question that would change history. What prevents me from being baptized? Right there in the wilderness, he entered the water and was baptized. No empire, no chains, no missionary army, no colonizer standing over him. Just belief. Think about the significance. One of the earliest known African Christians was not conquered into the faith. He chose it. And after that encounter, he returned home. That means Christianity was carried into Africa naturally, through conviction and personal faith, in the earliest days of the movement. Many historians believe this story reflects the beginning of deep Christian roots in the Horn of Africa, especially in regions linked to ancient Axum. So before Europe ever dominated the religion, Africa was already engaging with it. And what came next would be even more shocking, because Africa would soon become home to one of the oldest Christian nations on earth. If you think Christianity became African only after colonialism, this chapter destroys that idea completely. Because centuries before many European kingdoms accepted Christianity, a powerful African empire had already embraced it. That empire was Axum. Axum was no small tribe hidden from history. It was one of the great powers of the ancient world. Its merchants traded with Rome, Arabia, Persia, and India. Its kings minted coins. Its ports controlled major trade routes. Its influence stretched across the Red Sea. And then something extraordinary happened. In the 4th century, the ruler of Axum, King Ezana, accepted Christianity and made it the religion of the kingdom. Pause and think about that. This happened around the same era when much of Europe was still divided, unstable, or practicing older pagan religions. While many parts of Europe had not yet embraced Christianity, an African kingdom had already made it official. How did it happen? The story centers around a man named Frumentius. After being brought to the royal court, Frumentius gained trust and influence. He taught the Christian faith, and over time, King Ezana converted. Once the king accepted Christianity, the kingdom followed. Churches were established. Crosses appeared on coins. Christian beliefs became woven into the identity of the empire. This was not Europe civilizing Africa. This was Africa choosing Christianity on its own terms, early, independently, and powerfully. And the legacy never died. From that foundation grew one of the oldest Christian institutions still alive today, Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church. A church with ancient liturgy, deep traditions, and roots stretching back over 1,600 years. While empires rose and collapsed, while borders changed, while colonizers came and went, that Christian tradition endured. Let that sink in. When many people say Christianity is foreign to Africa, they ignore that one of the oldest continuous Christian civilizations on earth is African. But Ethiopia was not alone. To the northwest, another Christian African civilization would rise and fight invading armies so fiercely they became legendary. When people talk about African history, they often skip over one of its most astonishing chapters. A chapter filled with kings, cathedrals, warriors, and a Christian civilization that stood its ground for centuries. Welcome to Nubia. Located south of Egypt in what is now modern Sudan, Nubia was home to several powerful African kingdoms, including Nobatia, Makuria, and Alodia. These were not minor states. They had royal courts, organized armies, thriving cities, monasteries, bishops, and churches decorated with vivid African Christian art. By the early medieval period, Christianity had taken deep root there. But Nubia's greatest test was still to come. In the 7th century, as new powers expanded across North Africa and the Middle East, invading forces moved south toward Nubia. Many expected another quick conquest. They were wrong. When armies advanced toward the Nubian capital of Dongola, they met fierce resistance from Makurian defenders, especially their archers. Nubian bowmen became famous for precision and discipline. Chroniclers described volleys of arrows that stunned invading troops and forced them to retreat. Instead of being conquered, Nubia negotiated peace from a position of strength. That agreement, often called the Pact, helped preserve Christian Nubian independence for generations. Think about how remarkable that is. While many regions were being reshaped by war, Christian African kingdoms in Nubia remained standing for centuries. Their rulers adopted biblical names. Their churches rang with worship. Their walls were painted with saints, angels, and royal imagery blended with African identity. Archaeologists today still uncover murals, crosses, inscriptions, and cathedral ruins that prove how deeply Christianity lived in Nubian society. This matters because it breaks another false idea, that Africa only received Christianity passively. Nubia shows the opposite. Africa defended it. Africa adapted it. Africa made it its own. And yet, despite all of this, many people have never even heard the names Makuria or Dongola. History forgot them. But their story remains. And while Nubia was defending Christian Africa in the north, another region of Africa was shaping Christianity not with arrows, but with ideas powerful enough to influence the whole world. If you travel back far enough in Christian history, you eventually reach a region that many people overlook today. North Africa. Not Europe. Not modern Western centers. But cities like Carthage, Hippo, and Alexandria. Once among the most influential intellectual hubs of the ancient world. This is where Christianity was not just practiced, it was debated, written, and defined. In places like Roman-era Carthage, African thinkers were already wrestling with deep questions about faith, identity, and scripture. One of the most influential voices from this era was Tertullian. He was among the first writers to use Latin to explain and defend Christianity in a structured way. His writings helped shape how the early Western Church thought about doctrine and belief. Farther east, in the great intellectual city of Alexandria, Christianity encountered philosophy, science, and global knowledge systems. It was here that scholars like Origen developed complex interpretations of Scripture, pushing early Christian thought into deeper intellectual territory. Alexandria was not a small religious outpost. It was one of the greatest centers of learning in the ancient world. And African thinkers were at the center of it. Later, another major figure emerged, Athanasius of Alexandria. He played a critical role in shaping early Christian doctrine during theological conflicts that defined what Christianity would become for centuries. And then there is perhaps the most widely known of all, Augustine of Hippo. Born in North Africa, Augustine became one of the most influential Christian philosophers in history. His writings on theology, human nature, and morality are still studied today across Christian traditions worldwide. What is important to understand is this. The early Christian intellectual world was not centered in Europe alone. It was deeply rooted in Africa. North Africa produced theologians, philosophers, bishops, and writers who shaped Christian belief at its foundation, not as outsiders but as central voices. But over time, as history moved forward and empires shifted, this African intellectual contribution was often forgotten or minimized in mainstream narratives. Yet the evidence remains clear. Christianity's early intellectual structure was not built in isolation. It was shaped across regions, and Africa was one of its strongest foundations. So when people ask where Christianity developed its early depth and structure, the answer is not simple. It was not one place. It was a network. And North Africa was one of its most important pillars. By now, one truth is undeniable. Christianity was already deeply rooted in Africa long before colonial rule. But what about West Africa? This is where many people assume the story begins. And yes, Christianity arrived later in much of West Africa than it did in Egypt, Ethiopia, or Nubia. But even here, the real story is far more complex than Europe came, Africa obeyed. In the late 15th century, Portuguese ships reached the coast of Central and West Africa. Among the most powerful states they encountered was the Kingdom of Congo. Congo was organized, wealthy, politically sophisticated, and connected through trade networks. It had kings, nobles, military power, and diplomatic systems. This was not a helpless society waiting to be civilized. It was a kingdom making strategic choices. When Congo leaders engaged with the Portuguese, they saw opportunities: trade, military alliances, international recognition, new technologies, new religious ideas. The ruler Nzinga and Kuwu accepted baptism and took the name Joao I. But the bigger transformation came through his son, Afonso I of Congo. Afonso became a committed Christian ruler. He studied the faith, corresponded with Portugal, built churches, promoted literacy, and tried to shape Congo into a Christian kingdom on African terms. Read that again. On African terms. Because this was never just Europe exporting religion. Congo elites adapted Christian symbols into local culture. African names and Christian names coexisted. Royal traditions blended with church structures. Faith was interpreted through African realities. This created a uniquely African Christianity, not a copy of Europe. But then the darker side emerged. As the Atlantic slave trade expanded, relationships changed. European greed grew stronger than diplomacy. Christian language was increasingly used beside exploitation and violence. And this contradiction shattered trust. How could those claiming Christ also traffic human beings? That wound would echo for centuries. So yes, Christianity in West Africa became entangled with colonialism and slavery. But the beginning was not simple submission. It was negotiation, adaptation, and African agency. That distinction matters. Because Africa was never merely acted upon. Africa acted. And in the next chapter we confront the greatest distortion of all. How colonial powers later rewrote the image of Christianity itself. Now we arrive at the chapter that shaped modern memory more than any other. Because if Christianity had such ancient roots in Africa, why do so many people believe it is only a European religion? The answer lies in what happened later. As European empires expanded across Africa, Asia, and the Americas, Christianity was increasingly tied to conquest, political control, and economic exploitation. Colonizers built missions beside military forts. Priests sometimes traveled alongside imperial administrations. Bibles were preached in places where land was being taken. And in many regions, local traditions were dismissed as inferior or uncivilized. This created a powerful contradiction. The teachings of Jesus Christ spoke of justice, mercy, humility, and love. Yet those claiming his name often practiced domination. That contradiction left scars that still exist today. But there was another tool just as powerful as armies: images. Over centuries, especially in Europe, biblical figures were often painted to resemble the communities creating the art. That by itself was common human behavior. People everywhere imagined sacred figures through familiar cultural lenses. But during colonialism, those images took on political power. European-looking depictions of Jesus, Mary, apostles, and angels were spread globally through churches, books, statues, and schools. Slowly, a message was reinforced. Christianity looks European. Holiness looks European. Authority looks European. And the older memory of African Christianity was pushed into the shadows. People forgot that Egypt sheltered the child Jesus. Simon of Cyrene helped carry the cross. Ethiopia became Christian early, and Nubian kingdoms defended Christian states. African theologians shaped doctrine. History was not erased overnight. It was overwritten. That is why many descendants of colonized peoples associate Christianity only with oppression. Their pain is real. Their historical experience is real. But the conclusion is incomplete. Because colonial Christianity was one chapter, not the whole book. The same faith that was misused by empires had existed in Africa long before those empires were born. And once people rediscover that truth, the narrative changes completely. Because Africa was never just a target of Christian history. Africa was one of its architects. At this point, the story comes into focus. Not the simplified version. Not the colonial version. Not the distorted version. But the fuller, older, deeper reality. Christianity did not arrive in Africa as a stranger centuries after its birth. From the very beginning, Africa was already inside the story. It begins in Egypt, where the child Jesus Christ found refuge. It continues with African presence in the earliest biblical accounts, like Simon of Cyrene carrying the cross. It expands through the Ethiopian official in Acts, one of the earliest recorded African converts, who carried the message home along the ancient trade routes of the Horn of Africa. It grows into powerful Christian civilizations like Axum under King Izana, where Christianity became state religion long before many European regions fully embraced it. It flourishes in Nubia, through kingdoms like Makuria and Nobatia, where African Christians built churches, defended their lands, and preserved their faith for centuries. It deepens in North Africa, where thinkers like Augustine of Hippo, Tertullian, and others shaped Christian theology in ways still taught today. And it continues in West and Central Africa, where kingdoms like Congo negotiated, adapted, and reinterpreted Christianity in their own cultural language. So when we zoom out and see the full timeline, one truth becomes unavoidable. Africa is not on the edge of Christian history. Africa is inside it. But something happened over time. Colonialism, slavery, and empire didn't just change politics. They changed perception. They reshaped images, rewrote narratives, and blurred the memory of Africa's early role. And that is why this history matters today. Because when people lose their past, they lose part of their identity. But when they recover it, something powerful happens. The story becomes whole again. Christianity is not a European export that arrived in Africa late. It is a global faith that was present in Africa from the earliest moments. It was shaped by African thinkers and kingdoms. It was preserved in African institutions. It was later distorted during colonial expansion. And now, in the modern era, that full picture is returning. Not as a myth, not as propaganda, but as history. So the real question is not whether Christianity belongs to Africa. The real question is, how much of Christianity's early story has Africa been left out of? If this video opened your eyes to a part of history you were never taught, then take a moment to reflect on it. Because understanding history is not about pride or division, it's about truth. If you enjoyed this deep dive, like the video, subscribe for more historical breakdowns, and share this with someone who still believes Christianity only came to Africa through colonialism. And most importantly, drop a comment. Which part of this story surprised you the most? Because the conversation is just beginning. And the more we learn, the clearer the picture becomes. Stay curious, stay informed.